Hi, welcome to Ladies Leading. I'm your host, Jessica Gendron. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I believe in the world today there are too many stories of female leaders left untold. It has become my personal mission to give those stories a microphone. Ladies Leading intends to share the real stories of female leaders on their journeys to and through leadership, so that we might gain precious insight and advice from leaders just like them. We're giving women the microphone. Welcome to Ladies Leading. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ladies Leading. Today, we have Shari Rossow on the show, and I love this woman more than anything on the planet. I think she's one of the coolest people I have ever met in my whole life, and so I'm so excited to have her today. Shari, will you just start by telling us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do?
I would love to. Well, thank you so much for the intro. I feel the same way. And we've only known each other a short time, so that's a big deal for you to say that about me. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about myself. I am from a small town in northern Minnesota, and I grew up in a place called the Iron Range, and it is essentially a very small iron ore area of the world that actually produces a lot of the steel and has for a very, very long time for all kinds of things, bridges, vehicles, you name it. I've had a lot of my family work in the iron mines, and so I grew up in a very, very small town, lived there most of my life, and just kind of, like a lot of young people, just got myself into retail at the local Herberger's department store, and I just fell in love with helping people. And so, and I've always been, actually, if I think back on it, I've always been sort of attracted to the whole helper thing. And so I knew that whatever it is that I wanted to do was going to be centered around helping people. And I always just assumed that that's just what everybody did. And everyone really, focused on people. But I realized it probably the most when I went from a small company to a big box company. And then I just was like, oh, I love this retail thing. I should just do this. And I kept putting college off and off and off and off. And I only went for a year and a half, but and then I felt bad about it. But I'm like, I really like what I'm doing. And so, yeah, essentially grew up in retail, small family, one sister, two parents, all still with us. And yeah, so ended up with a big box retailer for 23 and a half years, where I still am, and a couple of kids and a husband and dogs, and living in the Minneapolis area. And yeah, life's good.
I love that. I think you can't grow up in the Midwest and not work for like a retail, like department store or, one of the
At least one.
Yeah. I mean, mine was sort of retail. I worked for the grocery store, and so I think you can't grow up in the Midwest and not do that or detassel.
Totally. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's sort of intrinsic in our upbringing, I think. So, well, tell us a little bit about your career journey. You did a little bit of that, but you've spent 23 years with the same company. Tell us about, how you ascended into leadership.
Yeah, man, when I think back on leadership and all of the people that I've been involved with throughout the years, I think the reason I stayed in retail is probably because there's been so much change. It's constant. And part of the reason at one point I wanted to leave retail is because there's a lot of change. But all along the way, I think I've taken a lot from a lot of really good leaders, and I've also realized really early what I didn't want to be like as a leader. And in some cases, those experiences shaped me, I think, more than the really good ones. And I just said, oh man, I'm never going to do that, or I'm going to do more of that. And I started keeping track of those things early on. And then because I'm from a small town and I come from parents who are, you get what you get, like my dad says to this day, you know, what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I'm probably as honest as the day is long, I don't know how to not be, which is probably good and bad because, you know, I can be a little bit of a bulldog at times, but I really believe that honesty and vulnerability have shaped who I am as a leader.
Mm.
And the times that I wasn't really sure about myself or that I felt like I wasn't being authentic to me and who I was, I did let it get to the point in some cases where I had to just pause and like dial the phone, like phone a friend and the people that I've trusted along the way to help me sort of get back to center. And you know, not forgetting where I came from. I don't know how to not be honest. And people know that. I think the biggest telltale sign for me was when I would have a conversation with someone and they would think through what we talked about and then they'd come back. And then they'd come back again. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I relate well. I'm not really sure. I think some people who kept coming back would say, oh, wow, you really made me think about this. And I kept thinking, I did? Like, I said that? I'm like, how profound. Are you sure that came from me?
I don't remember
even saying that. Exactly. But I know it's because that's what I get. That's what I would get from people. And so I try to emulate. I'm a bit of a chameleon in that sense. I pick up on things really easily that other people do that I want to do more of myself. So that's kind of shaped me, I would say, and taking some chances too along the way.
So you said, you know, I learned about like, oh, that's stuff I want to do, or oh, that's stuff I don't want to do. What is some of that stuff for you? I mean, obviously honesty. I think that's one of the things that I love about you is, you know, one of our first conversations, it was just so honest and real. And I think that's why we connected so quickly.
Yeah, you're the same way. And I picked up on that with you right away too. I just think like, I don't know how not to be. So if somebody asks me, are these jeans good on me? I'm like, well, yes and no. But I also know I'm going to get it back. And I think that's one of the things where, you know, it's hard sometimes to take truth. I think it's really hard. And I had a leader within the last year who was straight up honest with me and really, really was like, here's the deal. Like, here's kind of how you're showing up. And totally get it's from a good place, but like, you've got to think about it and you've got to look at yourself and you've got to really understand, like, you own it. And you need to be responsible for how you think this thing's going to end. And that honesty was amazing. I've had leaders also who were the total opposite of that. And that was when I was way younger. Like, I think when you first start out and your managers are so young, like don't you think about this, Jessica? Like, if I knew then what I know now,
oh my gosh,
as a young manager, I mean, I ran a clothing store at the age of 21. I remember cutting the ribbon in a mall, a little tiny mall with the Chamber of Commerce. And I was 21 and I was cutting this ribbon and I'm like, girl, you do not have any right running this business. Like, you don't even know what you're doing. And, you know, that didn't end well. It was not a good ending to that little stint, but man, did I learn a lot. And I thought, oh gosh, I can't run this like it's just a group of pals. Like, this is a business, you know?
Yeah.
And because I didn't go to business school, I went to college for a year and a half at a community college. And I really, like I mentioned earlier, I kept kicking myself for not going back. But I'll tell you, I mean, being with the same company for 23 and a half years, I've gone to that university. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I have been given so many opportunities to do such cool things that feels to me like it was part of my, what would have been college experience. And, but I think about what kind of a manager I was when I was that young. And I think how many people think I'll never do that. So what I'm saying now, like my wish would be that I'd be looked at as the leader that people want to be more like, not less like. Some of those things, like you started asking me, are just the obvious, like just didn't seem to care about you as a person. Had to start out with transparently, which I figure if you have to say that, you're probably not mostly. So I just think that not being 100% honest and just the kind of a little bit of the Minnesota nice passive aggressive thing, probably, which we all probably have done, at least I'm sure I have, but I try not to. Those are the things I would say I wouldn't want to repeat, but really the honesty thing is and vulnerable.
Yeah, I think, I've always been super honest in my relationships with people and in conversations with people. But when I had my first opportunity to manage people, I managed, I was my first job out of graduate school, and I was managing a group of college men. And I couldn't tell them the truth to save my life. I don't know what it was.
Oh my gosh.
Something about being honest with this group of kids, college aged men, I felt like they were so much more fragile that they couldn't handle the truth. And I tiptoed around them like a crazy person. And I look back at that experience and, all the lessons I learned, but all the stuff that I regret. And I'm like, gosh, I was like not honest with them at all.
I used to think about that in the same situation with male leaders that are has nothing to do with age, but male leaders. I would say it was more of a title thing for me. And I realized actually when I went from working in retail stores to a corporate environment, that intimidation factor just wasn't real. It was so made up by me because I was like, oh my gosh, this title is coming in, not this person is coming in to visit. You know what I mean? In stores, when a leader comes in, there is, I think, and I know this to be true of all the retailers I've ever worked for. Like, I held in high regard these roles that I wanted to be in, and I thought they were so prestigious, and they were making all these massive decisions and all this stuff. But I didn't look at those people as mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, like, put your pants on, one leg at a time, as they say. And I always was so intimidated. When I went into a corporate environment, I would walk in the hall by our CEO, hello, and hello back. Like, what? There are people too. Like, I think it's, and I would say that to young people starting out, and is that it's really hard to say to somebody, don't be intimidated by a title. Everyone's just who they are. But you really shouldn't be. Like, it's easy to say, it's probably harder to do. But if you're new and new to leadership, I had a person work under one of my teams at one point, and she's like, I just don't think I should manage people. I don't want to be responsible for another adult. She's like, what if I screw up? And I said, you're such a good listener, and you're so good at getting people to open up, and you're so engaging. This isn't about, you're not responsible for this adult. You're having a relationship and you're helping to shape this person. She came back to me a few months later and she's like, you were so right. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, that I had to be in charge of this person's everyday everything. And she goes, I love leadership. I love helping people get to the next level. I said, that's what it's about. Like, the biggest compliment to me is if somebody who I've helped get to their dream job gets to their dream job, like whether it's with the company or not. Like, that to me is like the ultimate prize.
Yeah, I at my last company, I had an employee say to me one time, sometimes people are really intimidated by you, Jess. And I was like, what? Me? Like, because I think for a lot of leaders, especially if you move up through the ranks in a company, you still think of yourself like that entry-level employee and not like the executive that you've become. And when people say they're intimidated by you, you're like, are you kidding? I'm just wondering who gave me this title and what the hell they think I know, because I
this big goof?
I'm making it up.
Yeah, right. One of my mentors said that too. Shari Ballard, I'll just say her name because she's amazing. She said that to me once. She's like, I figure out one of these days I'm just going to wake up and they're going to just take it all back and be like, what the hell was she doing in here? And, I think that's so true because I never have looked at myself as being like a vice president of something.
Mm-hmm.
And when other people have said, I look up to you for these things, it's so humbling. And you kind of forget, I think, that there's a lot of miles there that you've put in that I forget about. Like I forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun to reflect. It's fun to have a conversation with you about this because I forget about all the little things and they're not all great.
Yeah. No, they're not.
No.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the stuff you want to forget, the not all great stuff, right? What's the challenges? What's the lessons learned?
Yeah, I think lessons learned for me, well, I know for me, is first of all, to be confident in whether I've always had this underlying job security thing. Like, okay, so I'm the breadwinner of the family,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a bit of pressure that comes along with that.
Totally.
And so, is my happiness as important as making sure that we can have the cabin that we have and we're able to travel and things like that. And over the last year, I would say, and I touched on, there's been a lot of change everywhere. I mean, look at right now, like if this last few months and weeks has not drilled into our brains that we're all changing at Mach speed,
Mm-hmm.
that makes everything else look like nothing, then bring on the change, right? I think this whole thing has been with COVID and the riots and everything has been so present.
Mm-hmm.
And you really do take things day by day.
Yeah.
And our response to it, and my response has been, I mean, I'm learning a new job from home. I just took a new job 3 months ago. So I'm on week 11 of a new job, and COVID, I believe, was 13 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that opportunity has given me so many chances to change. But I'll tell you, last year, I really, and I was telling you about this when I saw you, I struggled a little bit with how much change was coming down. It was a lot. And I don't know if maybe myself, I said, I don't know if I'm ready for it. I actually think I was ready for it, but I really was kind of lazy about it. And I was like, oh, how many more people do I have to tell what I do? And then the one mentor, right? And then the one mentor that I mentioned to you who hit me between the eyes with it, he's like, you need to go have conversations and you need to put yourself out there and be an advocate for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I literally went on a Shari Rossow. And it was the first time where I was like, not worried about job security. I was like, here's what I have to give this. Here's what I have to give. Here's what I want to do. Here's where I want to spend my time. And I'm willing to do that wherever. And so I started networking my butt off. And I started talking to leaders that already knew me, that didn't know me, inside the company, outside the company, everything. And just really started to put myself out there. And it built a confidence in me that I don't remember having ever. Like there was always this security blanket thing over me, I think. I don't want to ruffle too many feathers. I don't want to say too much. And I don't know, for some reason, Jess, it just like went away when this one particular leader said, like, yeah, you have to fix some stuff. You've done a little harm in Pity Palace here in the last couple months. And so it's okay, by the way, it's okay to sit there for a while. Everyone has a moment. Yeah. And every person that I went and talked to, and I shouldn't just say leader, because it wasn't just about me talking to other leaders. I was talking to everyone. And I said, it's okay to have a moment, and it's okay to be vulnerable and share that you had a moment, because a lot of people have moments.
Yeah.
And we're all like going through this together. And that resulted in me getting the opportunity to do something super, super cool in a new role within the same company. But it's so new and fresh and like exciting. And, and if it hadn't have been, I was actually going to be okay with that too, which was brand new for me, to actually feel like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll do something different. But I was okay. And I talked to my husband about it, of course, too. And we were just like, yeah, I mean, like, it is what it is. We're healthy. You know, sadly, there's been a lot of terrible health problems and things that, you know, we could be dealing with, we're not. And so that which does not kill you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an experience I've had too, you know, where I think sometimes we just sit and have our own little pity parties, and then we do some collateral damage to the people around us because that negativity and that
Yep.
self-loathing that we go through spills over into other people. But you know, I had I had something similar happen. You know, ladies leading was just an idea, and it has been an idea for probably 9 months. I think I emailed you about
Yeah.
it
Yes, you
like
did.
almost a
You
year
did.
ago,
Yep.
about like, hey, I have this idea I want to talk to you about, and that's how long it's been sitting. And I have this coach who said to me in February, she was like, I don't know what you're waiting on. Like, what the hell are you doing? Get your butt in gear. You know,
We need this, Jess.
well, and she was like, this stuff's easy for you. It's not easy for everybody else. So get your butt in
That's
gear
so
and do
true.
it. And
So
I was
true.
like, oh. And sometimes you just need somebody to like flick you in between the eyes and be like, what are
Yep.
you doing? Pay attention. You know, just to kick your butt, to wake you back up to the reality and send you back on the journey. Because we just get stuck sometimes.
You know, the people that I worked with the most during my pity palace time said, I would never have known. I would never have known that you were feeling that way, which actually in hindsight made me feel worse because I was like, well, that's not very cool. I didn't show my authentic self to the people that actually care about me the most.
Mm.
And here I am every day giving advice to other people who've come to me and are, you know, going through massive amounts of change as well. And not just in the work environment, like family or whatever else too. And I'm not being authentic to myself by letting them in. Like, that's not cool. And so I started realizing that too. Like last fall, I think it was probably late fall, early winter, when I was just like, I can't do that. That's not a good thing. I want people to know that I need help. Everyone needs help,
Yeah.
you know? So, yeah, so that was interesting to me. Like when people would say, I didn't know you were going through all that. I was like, oh, well, I guess that's why I felt so alone because I wasn't really sharing it with anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we talk about this topic of self-advocacy? Because I just feel like this is a topic that women are really bad at.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, we're bad at advocating for ourselves. We're bad at speaking up for what we need. We're bad at saying, I need this, whether it's a raise or promotion or more time at home or better balance or whatever it is. We're really bad at it because I think it's fear, maybe. I don't know. Will you talk about that experience of going around to all these people in the organization and advocating for yourself and what that felt like, but also how it was received from your colleagues?
Yeah. So it was scary because some of the people that I felt like were at the top of the list for me to talk to were in pretty important roles. And so I told the story to myself, and my story was a little bit like, if you recall, Saturday Night Live, Al Franken played Stuart Smalley. And so I felt like I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, and doggone it, people didn't like me. And that's the story that I told myself over and over.
Yeah.
So when I got on their calendars, I was like, oh, I guess I didn't have to fight to get on a calendar. So that was my first sort of aha, you do matter. And then when I went and had conversations, and it was a variety of different conversations with all different levels within the organization, as I mentioned, and outside, I just started with the same thing, like, hey, I'm realizing that I'm really ready for a change. And I started with that because it's true, first off, but it was about what I felt like I deserved and wanted to be doing with, you know, I'm 48. I would love to retire by the age of 62 at the latest. And my husband's like, come on, 60. I'm like, I like working, man. Like, you retire earlier. He likes working too. He loves his job. But I love working. I really do. And I like to travel and stuff like that. So, and meeting new people all over the place. So I was really focused on that, like, I know what I have left to give this organization, and this is what I want to be doing while I'm here.
Mm.
I would love for there to be a place for me to be able to do that. But if there's not, I'm okay with it, actually. Can I still call upon you as a mentor? And because I don't know if it was because I did that way, or because I actually think people saw me that way anyway. I didn't see myself that way.
Oh, wow.
And so once I became more confident in my ability to actually put myself out there and take credit for the things that I knew that I was really good at, which to me is like, I like making a difference in people's lives. I like leading people, and I like being asked for advice, and I like giving it, and I like receiving it. And so, and I'll make it, and I want to make a difference, and I want to move on. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to move on from a role or a person. In my mind, I just need to take on a new challenge. I need to do something different. But all those challenges and things that equaled up for me of what I wanted to do for the rest of my adult career life was around a particular thing. And so once I identified that, you know what the common thread is, I had to do a lot of like thinking back on roles I had. I'm a big strengths finder person. I'm a massive Enneagram coach. So I'm big on the Enneagram. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. What number are you?
I'm a 3.
Okay. I'm an 8.
Are you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right. Says so much. That's so
I'm
much.
an 8 too, though. I'm
Listen,
an 8 too.
Well, yeah, no, of course you are, because 8s go to 2 when secure, under stress. Anyhow, yeah, we could talk. That's for another whole. Maybe we should do an Enneagram one.
Well, that'd be fun.
But I just really, I believe in all that kind of stuff to help just bring to light. It also opens up conversations for people to have.
Yeah.
And so when I started leaning into this, I want to make a difference, and then I want to move on. But it's all centered around this one thing, which for me was technology, Jess. And it's just like, I really think it's fun to try these new things and learn about these new technologies. And there's a bit of strategy in there, like my, through Strength Finders, number 1 was strategic for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt like that's what I need to do. Like, I want to do it. And so I started talking to many, many people, and I started making some, old connections, new again, and new connections, and I ended up in a new role around technology. And
was it a role that they created for you, or was it a role that already existed?
Nope, it's a brand new role. Wow. And it wasn't created. It was created for me, with me, my accountability to it, I should say. And I have one team member, which is also very, very new for me and different. But I love it. I mean, I love it. We're learning so much, and we have so much. It's such a great time for this particular technology, because it's just the world, and efficiency, and just being smart about money you're spending and things like that. So it's really, really great, very exciting. But I wouldn't have been able, if I didn't do what I did. I don't know where I'd be right now, to be honest with you. I really, really don't.
Wow. I
could still be in the same role that I was in, which is an awesome, highly responsible role. But I knew it was time for me to step aside. I just knew, I knew it was time.
Yeah. That awareness, I feel like, I don't know if that awareness is learned, if it comes to you with time. I don't know if there's specific work that you can do to become more aware in that way. But I think that that's such a critical piece for so many people, is knowing what your skills are, being able to advocate for those things, and knowing the things that you love on top of that. I think that's a hard thing to come to.
I think, for me, people have always told me, like, you seem so confident and approachable. Like, I used to be told that as well, but I was like, what? But I remember a time when I was a young manager of just in a store, and I had my general manager, my boss at the time, say, when somebody comes up to you, stop what you're doing and look at them. And I felt like in that moment, I was so ashamed of my behavior, but then I realized I did that all the time. And then when I had my
You're
first
like
son,
typing at the same time and they're talking to you, right?
yeah, 100%.
It's called multitasking.
Oh my gosh, that's what I always called it. When I had my first son, though, I remember when he was about 1 and he was tugging on me, and I remember being in the kitchen at my laptop, and I remember doing one of these. And not that we, we all have done it. We'll all do it again. And it's okay. So it's like, don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
I realized I was doing that to straight up adults. Like, I was doing that to people, and it was really not good, and it was not healthy, and it was not, I look back on it. That's why I said, like, I feel like when you do become a leader of people and you're young, there's so much responsibility that comes with that. And just by listening, listening is probably the thing that I've learned the most from just doing it wrong. You know what I mean? Like just not doing it right. And it's hard. It is hard because we do a million things at the same time. We all do that.
Yeah.
It's so
especially
hard.
now when we're home.
Oh my gosh. And thank God we do, because nothing would get done.
Right.
But yeah, that and just being confident, but being having humility while being confident.
Yeah.
Because then I think it's just boasting, which is gross.
Yeah, it's icky. I don't like that.
Yeah, which is the key. But yeah.
Yeah. The listening piece, I think, is so critical. I just, I remember being a young manager, and you'd hear something or somebody'd come to you with a problem, and I'd always assume the worst in the decision that someone had made, or the behavior that in the way somebody else was treating another colleague, and I really had to teach myself to slow down and take the time to listen to the story.
Right.
And to understand the perspective that people come to the table with, because I would use my lens to look at everything. And I think that's the great power of listening, is just, it puts you out of your lens and in somebody else's.
Well, and just asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? It used to drive me crazy. I'm like, just tell me what to do. But it's like, there's no learning there. So I think, yeah, it's just crazy if you think back on it. Being a young manager, oh my gosh, and I bet we could both swap stories on how, being a young female manager, the stuff that, we had to deal with that just seemed like others didn't, that I think back on those things. And I know you're like this too. I become, that's when I take my cape out of the closet. And I go to defend anybody who I feel like has not been treated fairly in that situation. And we have the ability to talk to young women about confidence with humility has been really fun in the last year for me, because I wouldn't have believed it before that. Like I really had I really did have a moment about this is not going to kill me. Just if I'm not happy, I have to change. Like that's on me. That's entirely on me. And so I think that's speak up, be honest, and telling someone to be confident is so easy to do, but it's so hard sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's the great mystery that every woman's trying to figure out, is how do you find your own confidence, and what does it take to be confident? And I think the things that I've really learned is that the more work you do on understanding you, the more confident you feel, the more confident you can be when you know more about yourself.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, talk to me about advice that you'd give young women, or even women who are just looking to travel up the ladder. Like what's the advice you'd have?
I don't know if you've experienced this, but before I would say, what advice do I give? I would say, if you come to me for advice and I give you advice, and then you come back to me for the same thing and I give you the same advice and you don't take it, don't come back. And I know that sounds really mean, but and I'm sure we've all done it. We've all either been mentored or have mentored people who we don't really want their advice. We just want to check a box to say that we have a mentor. Or we don't necessarily need a sponsor. We don't necessarily need an advocate. We don't know what we need, but somebody told us along the way that we need to have somebody to talk to outside of the org. So it became like almost like a checkbox of things. And I don't know about you, but I've had to stop meeting with certain people because I felt like I didn't feel like there was an authentic give take. Yeah. So one bit of advice I would give young, any age really, but for me, I would say more so for a young person would be, I love when people come in prepared with a couple of questions and things that they're really looking for help. And then, by the way, be okay with me asking for your help too. I don't think that there can be any success in a one-way relationship because we are all so busy. I don't know about you, Jess, but I've never been so busy, and it feels like I love it. But at the same time, all of our time, regardless of who you are, is precious.
Yep.
And if we're giving that of each other to each other, then we need to get something from it equally. Yep. And so my thing is just be on purpose with what you be on purpose and be okay with just taking it and just doing, ask for whatever you want. Our CEO told this me, said this to me before she was our CEO. She said, I was having a meeting with her and she said, or I was going to her office and I said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for making the time for me. She's like, oh my gosh, go back out and come back in and don't say that. Because she's like, I would do this all day if I could. I love talking to people. I love talking to you. Don't say that. And I was like, okay. It hit me because people said that to me all the time. And I'm like, don't say that. I love talking to people and I love that. So don't feel like you're taking someone's time because you're not. If you're able to get time together, look at it that way. It's worth it for both of you and lean into that and take every single minute that you get and be super selfish with it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great advice. I have this group of women that I'm leading a class with. They're all young to early to mid-career, and they just graduated. It was a 12-month class and they just graduated. And when I asked them, if someone were to ask you about the class, what would you say to them? And over and over and over again, they kept saying, don't take the class if you're not willing to do the work. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that was not the response I was expecting to hear from them. And I think, overwhelmingly, they talked about, we thought this class would just be a really good opportunity to sit in a class for a couple hours a month and learn some stuff and network and get some advice from some business people. But it's hard work, and doing the work on yourself, it takes an investment. And if you're not willing to put in the work, then I think you're not going to get anything out of it. And I thought that was so important. It's super important. Hear.
Yeah, totally. Especially because when you're out and, whether you know this or not, and I hope you do, your confidence is so amazing because I know you're a goofball. and I knew that the minute I met you because you're just so funny, but you're so serious when you need to be, and you're so profound, I think. And for people to know that, confidence doesn't need to look a certain way either. I think that, there's just so much to learn by how somebody just pays attention to what somebody's saying and how they show up. And your class probably ended virtually, did it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is also interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, to your point about mentoring, everybody thinks that they need to have a mentor, but I think that they think it's this magical, wand we wave over people where you all of a sudden get everything in our brain and all of our lived experiences and lessons just sort of dumped into you. And that's going to magically make you a better leader. And it's just not quite that simple. And, the people that I consider mentors for me are the people that challenge me. And then they're the people that I go to when I'm thinking a certain way and I need someone to counterpoint it. That those are the people that I lean on the most in my career, not the people who are the echo chamber that just validate everything I want to hear.
Oh, I so love what you just said. I feel like I really can tell you that there has been one leader in the last year for me, person who was 100% honest with me and knew that what they were about to tell me was going to hurt my feelings.
Mm.
Everyone else around me was about, I would give it a 75 to 85% honest. And I knew it. I knew it sitting there. I knew it. But I was okay, because if it was what I was seeking from that person, I got, or it was a good direction. Okay, I needed that because that person will lend this to me, and that's what I need. But the one person that was so honest with me is not the one I would have expected it to be. And so that was a lovely surprise. And now I know that particular person is really an advocate for me. I wouldn't put them in the mentor category because I know them too well. And to me, a mentor for me, and the definition is not the same for everyone. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Totally.
To me, my best mentor I've ever had in my life, I never even met the guy. He worked in North Carolina at a financial business, and we had a phone-to-phone relationship when I was, I'm going to go with 15 years ago. And he gave me the best advice of any mentor I've ever had. I can't even remember his name, Jess. That's terrible. But he gave me the best advice.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's not true. I remember his name. I had to think a minute, but I do remember his name. My advocates, though, I had lost. I had lost a lot of leaders that came and went, and I knew that I needed new ones. Mm. And then I needed sponsors. I felt like I needed sponsors. So all three of those are very different for me. And I felt like I needed all of them. A mentor for me was somebody whose job I really thought was interesting, or just had no recollection of me at all. Like they were like, hey, listening to you, you sound like you're a bit of a whiner. I don't even know you, but you sound whiny. So like, buck up. And this was what my phone-to-phone mentor guy told me at one point. He was like, here's how it sounds to me. I mean, we've never met, and here's how it sounds. And I was like, wrecked for like a hot second. And I was like, holy cow, is he right? And then, but I've had some, so I had needed that advocacy back. Mm-hmm. And without it, I wouldn't be in the role that I'm in 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we just, nothing comes easy, I think. We just,
exactly. That's what we're here to tell you.
Nothing comes easy.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
And I just, sometimes I think that I encounter young females who want to lead and work hard, but they think that, we're just going to magically wave a wand and it's going to be easy. And it's a grind. It is a grind. I don't know. And I'm not a dude, and I've never been a dude. So I just don't know if that's their same experience.
Yeah.
Or that's uniquely a female experience.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think it's a fair statement, and I'm sure it's not everywhere. Nothing's the same for anyone ever at all. But I do think the energy is different. I think, at least in my experience with women that I've talked to, there's a different energy that comes with it. I think if you're female versus male, that you have to almost feel like you have to earn it to say it. Or, you can't just walk in the room and hold the room and hold court. There's a little bit more of a feeling out the room, coming and showing up a certain way. Don't be too bold in that meeting because it's not the right, people. Or I rather like asking a question that I know other people want the answer to, that I know is going to be somewhat controversial. Do you ever do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of fun to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like poking. Like, I'm just going to drop a bomb in the middle of this meeting.
Yeah, or just acronyms. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, some people just don't want to ask, and usually it's the female that will just kind of like take the note but not know what they just wrote down even meant, Yes. It's so interesting.
Yeah. We just stay silent when we know we should say something. And
yeah, so that would be advice both of us would give, right? Mm. Oh my gosh, if you ever think that's that you shouldn't say something, say it, because there's at least 3 or 4 other people in the room that don't know either.
Totally.
That's the thing that I'm like, I know that is so true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And then somebody will say to you, "Oh, thank you for asking that. I didn't know either."
Yeah.
That's funny.
Like, oh, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I know. I find myself on a lot of Zoom calls lately where I have people in the chat sending me private chats that are like, will you say something? Will you say it? I'm like,
yeah.
You say something. Like, why do I
Or do
always
you
have
ever
to be
go,
the one?
yeah, or do you ever go, Jessica has something to say? There's got to be a bit of a relationship there.
That's never happened. Nobody's ever done that to me. They just like send me private chats. or sometimes they'll do this. Jessica and I were just talking about this, and then they turn it to you. Jessica, do you want to talk about that? And I'm like,
yeah. I guess I do now.
I guess I do.
No, I think it's good. Yeah, I think that's would it be like, that's probably a good question. Like, I'll ask you one. If you could wave a wand, what would you want women to do differently in any environment, really? Like, if you could.
Yeah, I think there's so much imposter syndrome that women have about every space that we take up in the workplace. We question every invitation to every meeting. We question anytime we show up with certain expertise. And, I think for me, that part has always come a little bit easier because in a lot of the roles that I've had in my career, I've been a subject matter expert. Mm-hmm. And so when I sit in a room, it's because they value my subject matter expertise and they want my opinion. And so when I sit in a lot of rooms, I don't even think about that stuff because I know I'm the expert in the room. Mm-hmm. But I think for a lot of women, they're invited to rooms that they don't know why they're there, or they don't believe that they have the expertise to speak up. And I wish that women would do a better job of stop doubting themselves and to stop writing the story that they're not good enough to be in whatever room or whatever table or in whatever position they've been put in, and to just own the fact that they're in the room and use it. Or own the fact that they're at the table and use it, or own the fact that they're in the position and use it as an opportunity. For me, that's the imposter syndrome. And I had tons of it when I was young in my career. I'd sit at tables and I'm like, who the hell let me in?
Yeah. Have you ever been asked? Well, I've been asked to participate for things in the past, and because there are fewer female officers in most organizations, right? Mm-hmm. In the past, I've been asked to participate in something, and rather than just being like over the moon about the opportunity, I've been really on purpose to stop and ask, why me?
Great advice.
Because I mean, it's time. It's time. And if it's a travel, it's time away from family. Mm-hmm. Why me? May I ask that question? Why would you want me in this program? What is the program? What do I get out of it? And then what, why me? And I asked that once, and I said, who nominated me? And why did they nominate me? And most of the occasions I'm just very proud of that. And a couple, it's been like, well, it was either you or so-and-so, because, that's who's available. And I'm like, well, then I can't do it. I mean, there's too many other commitments, And I think that's okay too. You don't have to participate in everything. Don't you find that's exhausting?
Yes.
Like if you, oh my gosh, there's only so much time. And we do, I will stereotype women, like we do tend to overcommit.
Yes.
And then, and if we underdeliver, then it's like, it's just a wreck.
Yeah. Well, and we underdeliver because we've overextended.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. I was that way at my last career, in my last job, at my last company. The expectation for me to be engaged in a lot of stuff was there. And so I was overextended. I was overextended in my personal life. I was overextended at work. I was overextended in extracurriculars. And so I wasn't really doing a lot really well, except for the stuff that I was used to doing on a day-to-day basis that could do almost mindlessly. And I've been really intentional since I've changed companies to start saying no more. And one of the things that I talk a lot with young women about is instead of thinking, what did you lose by saying no? Think about what did you gain from saying no? What did you get when you said no? Because I think we only think about it from a loss standpoint.
Yeah. And the only thing you give up is mythical free time. Yeah. Like if you say no, well, I mean, I guess like what I'm saying, I guess, is if you say no, you fill it up with other things, because we're always going to be filling it up.
Yeah, but you fill it up with things that are more important.
Be on purpose with that time and fill it up with things like that are going to be, and be selfish about it. I also don't think that I shouldn't stereotype, we have to put ourselves first. It's sometimes easier said than done.
Okay, so Shari, last question that I like to ask everybody. What is one skill or trait that you think is critical to a female success?
Oh man, I think that I've said it probably too much already, but honesty.
That's your word.
It kind of is. And I have to tell you, because that's the one that's been with me all along. I don't feel like I've ever had to learn how to be honest. I feel like I've absolutely had to learn to be vulnerable. I've had to learn how to be confident. And I actually have had to learn to be okay with emotion, where a lot of people in the past that I've worked with have been told, don't cry. Yeah. And crying is not okay. There's no crying in baseball, as they say. But it's not true. And I have probably broken down in more vulnerable moments than I haven't. And when I do, it's not because I want to, it's because I give into what it is that's making me that way. And I there's nothing I can do about that, because then I feel like I'm not being myself. Yep. And I'm not being true or honest to the moment. And anytime I talk about previous teachers, my favorite teachers and my parents, I get super emotional about it, just because, that's just who I am. So I would say let those tears flow. There's definitely a time for it. And I wish I could stick it when I get a little sappy. And I know there are tricks like drinking water. One of my old bosses said, just have a bottle of water and drink water. Like, it doesn't work for me.
I just end up choking awkwardly.
I just cry harder because I can't breathe. No. But I've tried, and I think it's okay. I've really owned that. But honesty has to be, I've just always been honest.
Yeah.
So I have to say that.
Yeah. I think that's your word. What's been really funny is that a lot of the women on the series, there's this thread that weaves through everything, and some of them it's courage, and some of them it's self-advocacy, and some of them it's allyship, and your word's honesty. One more follow-up question though, just because you and I are sort of cut from the same cloth when it comes to honesty. I used to tell my staff all the time, I value transparency and honesty. And so those are going to be the way that I communicate with you. But I think for women, sometimes we get labeled as blunt or abrasive or
a different B word.
Yeah. How do you navigate around that?
I haven't always.
Me neither.
I've had plenty of opportunity to be faced with, less than a couple of years ago, I had a senior leader refer to me as a bulldog, which, by the way, I took as a compliment.
I take that as a compliment for sure.
Yeah, I was like, it's better than being passive aggressive, which I'm not. So, there has to be humility in it. And I feel like if you are vulnerable and you share and you're open, you cannot just receive someone's vulnerability. Sometimes that comes at a little bit of where it can come across as you're making it about you. And you know what I mean? It's that relator factor, that I've done that too. I find there's a place for that. So as long as it's always about what they need to get off their chest,
Yeah.
This is where that personality stuff comes in a lot for me, I think, is that knowing how someone ticks and how they operate based on what they've told you is important to them.
Yeah.
And treat others the way they want to be treated.
Yep.
Is important. And I would say just to always be curious about someone else and where they're coming from, and it'll just happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. You just said something and I said, that's such great advice. And I lost it, but there was just something in there. It was just solid gold. It's probably going to be one of your quote pictures that we'll make for this episode. So,
Awesome.
Shari, it was so fun to hang out with you. Thanks for hanging out with me.
I feel the same.
I'm so sad we live states apart from each other, because I feel like you and I would, hang out more often, but
I think we would too.
I just think the world of you. I'm so grateful to have you on the show. I'm so grateful that you spent some time with me today. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much too. And honestly, what you're doing is amazing. Don't ever stop. Like, if other things come in, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, you're such a force, and you leave a wake, and it's really, really important work that you're doing. So
thank you. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. If you want to nominate a woman for the next episode, please feel free to visit ladies-leading.com and go to recommend. We'd love to hear about other women that should be on the show. Thanks for joining us. So, fun story. Shari alluded at the beginning of the episode that we had known each other a little over a year. It's actually been a little bit more than 2 years since we met first. We met over a mutual passion for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We were at an event at the hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, over a dinner. And the next thing I knew, Shari and I were talking. 2 hours had passed. We were knee to knee on bar stools, deeply engaged in really meaningful, really honest, really vulnerable conversation. And I think that is so indicative of who Shari is as a leader. At the beginning of the episode, she said, I believe honesty and vulnerability have shaped who I am as a leader. And I think that in my experiences with her, that is 100% who she is. She is honest, and she's authentic, and she's vulnerable. And I think that's what's made her such an incredible leader. And it also highlights 2 of the key lessons that I want you to take away from her episode. The first one is about honesty, but with humility. Shari talked a lot about speaking up and being honest and speaking your truth and all of those things in the episode. But at the very end, she talked about honesty with humility. And I think for us as women, we get so caught up and so nervous about speaking up, particularly in environments with lots of men, or environments with lots of people, or in big meetings, or in boardrooms. We get really nervous about speaking up or sharing an opinion or being too honest, because we're afraid of being perceived as abrasive or blunt, or, as Shari put it, another B word. And the reality is, when Shari said honesty with humility, that was a really important caveat. I think when we speak from a place of honesty, but we do so with a level of humility, that we are not the smartest person in the room, but that our opinion and our voice matters, and that we share it from a place of wanting people to know the truth, wanting people to hear what we believe, but also, I'm speaking this because it is my goal to make things better. And that is what humility is really about, I think, in honest communication. Yeah, it may be blunt, but it won't be abrasive if we come from a place of humility. And I think that was such an important part of what Shari shared. Honesty is such a critical piece of what makes leaders effective. And I think sometimes women struggle in that capacity. But I think if we can start to think about honesty with humility, it might help us transform the way we approach it, but also the way we view honest communication in our work. The other piece is about self-advocacy. And I think honesty and authenticity and vulnerability, pieces of who Shari is as a leader, are such important and critical components when we talk about self-advocacy. There was one point when Shari talked about the Shari Roadshow, as she called it, where she went on this sort of tour of meetings throughout her organization to talk about what she wanted for her career. And I think that that was such a bold and important move for her, and something that a lot of us often shy away from. We shy away from asking for what we want. We shy away from saying, this doesn't work for me anymore. This doesn't make me happy. And I think that Shari did all of that, understanding that the consequence of her honesty and of her self-advocacy might be that she talks her way out of her own organization. And so I think what's important for us to understand about self-advocacy is that we have to be willing to ask for what we want. We have to be willing to have conversations about what's working for us and what's not working for us. But in that same vein, we have to be willing to face the consequences of those conversations if that means the next right place for us is somewhere outside the organization. She said at one point, if I'm not happy, that's on me. And I think that that was a really important moment of really recognizing, if we're unhappy in our roles, if we're unhappy with our managers, if we're unhappy with some communication, if we're unhappy with our colleagues, coworkers, team members, vision, whatever it is, if we're unhappy, it's on us. And it is our responsibility to advocate for what we want and advocate for what we need by having conversations with people, by speaking our truth, by being authentic and vulnerable in those conversations, so that people understand where we're coming from and we can advocate for ourselves appropriately. You know, in a past episode, one of our guests said, and I can't remember who it was at this point, but she said, you get 100% of the things you don't ask for, which is nothing. And I think that that's such an important part of the self-advocacy that Shari did, is that she understood if she was unhappy, that was on her. And that part of her advocating for herself was having conversations with people about what she believed her strengths were and what she could do for the organization and what would make her feel fulfilled in her work. And if that wasn't at her current organization, that was also okay for her. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that we've talked about on this series related to self-advocacy. And I think that, you know, when we look at Shari's story and when we look at her experiences and we say, oh, Shari's a great self-advocate, I think what that really means is we have to understand what our strengths are and what are the things that give us joy and make us feel passionate in our work. And what are the things that we do best? 1. 2 is that we have to be able to communicate those in a way that's honest, but also in a way that's humble, where we have to be willing to come to the table and say, this is the stuff I believe I do well. And then 3, be able to say, and here's what I want, or here's what I need. And be willing to accept if the answer is, I can't offer that, or that's not a possibility, or I can't create that for you, or that experience or role or responsibility doesn't exist here. And I think that that's such an important part of the self-advocacy, knowing who you are, being able to communicate it in a way that is authentic, honest, and humble. And 3, being willing to hear the word no, or that's not possible, as an outcome of that advocacy. I think we're afraid of step 3. And I think that that's why most of us avoid those conversations, because we're afraid of no. And because we can't imagine finding another job or looking for another role And the reality is we have to weigh the consequences of not having that conversation. And the consequences for many of us are we're unhappy, we're unfulfilled, we're stuck in a job that we don't do well because we're not passionate about it. And I think that that's what I really love about Shari is she said, I love working here. I am passionate about these things. And if I can do these things here, I'd love to do that. And if not, I'll go somewhere else where I can, where she decided if I'm not happy, that's on me. And I think that that's the important lesson I want you to get about self-advocacy from Shari is that we have to be willing to speak our truth. We have to be willing to honestly communicate about what it is that we're good at and what it is that we need, and be willing to face the consequences of those conversations as well. But I think that the third thing, if I had to add a third, is that she's about relationships. If you spend 5 minutes with Shari in person, you will know that she is about relationships. Because when she sits down and she talks to you, she leans in, she makes eye contact, and everything around you melts away because she's totally engrossed in the conversation with you. And I think that that's what's so incredible about her and what I adore about her more than anything. When we are great leaders and when we do invest in relationships with people, those self-advocacy conversations are so much easier because we have trust and we have relationship and we have credits with people. And those credits aren't because I want something from you. Those credits are because I've decided to deeply invest in our relationship with each other. And that comes through being ourselves, being authentic, and being honest and vulnerable with them as well. She talked a lot about sharing about her own personal experiences and being willing to open up to people and even crying. And I think that that is such an important component of building relationships and showing vulnerability so that we can deepen relationships with one another. In that conversation that Shari and I had the night that we first met, that's exactly what happened. Her and I were sharing really personal things with one another about experiences in our work and in our lives, and talking about our children and talking about St. Jude. And I think that that's so intrinsic in who she is, but those things can be built in us as leaders, and they can be learned for us as women if it isn't natural or intrinsic. An investment in others, honesty with humility, and learning to advocate for ourselves no matter the consequences. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Ladies Leading. Please be sure to check out our website at ladies-leading.com, where you can learn more about the project, see past episodes, and also recommend a woman to be on our show. Want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, the Center for Leadership Excellence. They're actively working to make organizations great places for women to work. You can learn more at cleindy.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll join us next time as we pass the microphone to another female leader.